Welcome into Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we start a new trend of looking at the other teams in the NL East and how they're going to attack their offseason. Today, it's the defending NL East champions and the losers to the Phillies in the NLDS, the Atlanta Braves. We'll break it down on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas, credentialed Phillies media member. Been talking Phillies baseball on 97.5 The Fanatic for years now. Happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you, as always, for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are indeed free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today, we're starting something new that I'm going to do over the next week or so of episodes here on Locked On Phillies. We'll sprinkle some other stuff in between. Like I know today is the day that Bryce Harper is scheduled to be having his surgery on his elbow or some type of procedure. So in tomorrow's episode, we will break down any news we get from that. I'm recording this before we hear anything on Wednesday. So not sure what's going on yet. It is Thanksgiving Eve. So hopefully tomorrow on the Thanksgiving episode, we'll have something to be thankful for. I have something fun to do with that on the Thanksgiving episode that will be out at 5 o'clock on Thanksgiving. But today, what we're going to start with, we're going to start looking at the offseason from other teams in the NL East perspective. Why is this important to the Philadelphia Phillies? Well, I believe it was Sun Tzu in The Art of War who said, you must know your enemy as well as you know yourself. No, I'm making that all up. But I do think it's important to know who you're going up against and what they're looking for, know where the crossover is between their interests and the Phillies' interests. And also, it's never too early to start looking at who's going to be a problem in 2023. And we're going to go in order of how teams finished in the division. So it'll be Braves, then Mets. Yes, the Braves chased down the Mets. Just a nice reminder for you Mets fans. Hope that wild card series was fun. The Braves, then the Mets. Then it will be the Marlins. Then it will be the Nationals. Obviously, we're skipping the Phillies because this is always Locked On Phillies. And I don't want to make this like Locked On Braves or try and do that by any means. This is just a general peek in, so you have an idea of what's plaguing these other teams or what they have going right for them as we head deeper into the 2022 offseason. Now, I have a great article here from Mark Bowman, who writes for MLB.com, covers the Braves for them. And this is a nice little 5 questions facing the Braves this offseason. So shout out to Mark Bowman for providing me with a little bit of content today. And I'll break down his 5 points. His first one is the biggest one, and we've talked about it already. His point 1 says, will Swanson return? Dansby Swanson, of course, a free agent. He was one of the offensive and defensive catalysts for the Braves in their 2022 NL East championship season, even though they didn't make it out of the NLDS for some strange reason. But Dansby Swanson, a talented young shortstop, he's going to be one of those top 4 guys at the position who are available. Does he come back? Do the Braves try and replace him with Carlos Correa or Trey Turner or Xander Bogaerts, one of those guys potentially? How does that work out? And what Mark Bowman has written down here, he's positioned himself about extra $30 million on the free agent market. So it'll almost certainly have to be, according to Bowman, a 5-year deal worth between $100 and $110 million for Dansby Swanson. And they're saying that the price point for the Braves might be about $25 million. So maybe Swanson will be a little too pricey for what they're looking to spend. Whether or not Swanson will return could be a big thing. And there's no guarantee. Like we saw Freddie Freeman go to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And then all of a sudden, Matt Chapman decides to come to the Atlanta Braves, and he's an absolute monster, and they just basically replace there. There's no guarantee they do that with Swanson, even though guys are available. So shortstop is going to be a huge question for the Atlanta Braves, and that's why it's important for the Phillies to get one of the top options on the market so that Trey Turner isn't wearing a Braves jersey, or whoever the Phillies end up with. If they do indeed end up with one of the top guys, it's one less option for the Braves. So a little bit of mixed interest there between the Braves and the Phillies. The next thing Bowman brings up is a rotation addition. And he mentioned specifically the NLDS series where Max Fried was sick. Spencer Strider had that injury, of course, and the Braves rotation just wasn't good enough for them to get out of the NLDS. And the Phillies took huge advantage of that. Now, they've got a bunch of names that are still there. For Max Fried, Strider, Kyle Wright, Charlie Morton, Jake Odorizzi could potentially return. Who knows what's happening there? There's some other young guys too. Mike Soroka is coming off of another injury, but he's still around. And there are some good free agent pitchers. But the Braves, similar to the Phillies, looking at rotation depth. One of those one-year contracts for a veteran guy could be something Atlanta's looking at to bolster their rotation. It shows you how important it is for the Phillies because, frankly, Atlanta's rotation was better than the Phillies this year, and they're still looking at depth. So that's interesting. Now we get into the bad part of the offseason. Marcell Ozuna is still owed $37 million over the next 2 seasons, and he's absolutely terrible by the Atlanta Braves. They're going to probably look to try and move him at some point and figure out how to try to trade him. I don't know. They tried to trade him for Patrick Corbin before the trade deadline, and they wouldn't even take that, the Nationals, and Patrick Corbin is god-awful. So who knows what you're going to do, but it's a terrible contract. The hope, if you're a Phillies fan, is that there is no way out of the Ozuna contract via a trade, and the Braves have to eat all that money over the next couple seasons. And frankly, no one should want this guy. He's a problem off the field. Arrested for a DUI, domestic violence in his past. Just not a good person, I'm willing to say, and not a good baseball player right now, I'm willing to say as well. He looked awful in the series in the NLDS against the Philadelphia Phillies, and frankly didn't have that good of a year in general. So the Braves just committed a bunch of money to Marcell Ozuna and didn't work out. So they've got to figure out what to do with him this offseason if they can move him. Left field is interesting. Vaughn Grissom might be an option out there in left field. Maybe he's an option to play in the infield with Dansby Swanson gone. Eddie Rosario, though, was not great in left field for them this year. So maybe there's an option to go ahead and get a corner outfielder in the market. The names mentioned here, Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler continues to be someone the Braves won't stop mentioning. So Jorge Soler is mentioned again. But left field is an interesting option for the Atlanta Braves. Not really a market the Phillies are in, but that's a point of concern. And the last one, it's something similar to what the Phillies are asking. Will they look for bullpen help is the bullet here from Mark Bowman. So they have a solid base of a bullpen in Atlanta, possibly more so than what you got here in Philadelphia. But still, everyone who's a contender is going to be looking to make their bullpen better this offseason. There's a plethora of options, but just know that the Braves are another one of those teams that are in their championship contention window. They look like they're going to be aggressively going after someone to replace Dansby Swanson, first of all, a corner outfielder, second of all, and then the mind turns to pitching depth, both in the starting rotation and the bullpen. I mean, it sounds very similar to what the Philadelphia Phillies are doing. Replace Gene Segura at shortstop. Well, I know Bryson Stott played there, but middle infield. Find a potential little holdover to protect from Bryce Harper's injury if he does indeed miss a significant amount of time. That'd be a corner outfielder. Starting rotation depth, bullpen depth. Very similar things, very similar teams in the Philadelphia Phillies and Atlanta Braves. And while the Braves have a ring to their name, 2 World Series appearances between these two teams, very similar runs. The dichotomy between the two of these teams, it's very interesting to compare the two, is what I'm trying to say. So the Braves offseason look at them to be one of the closest competitors to the Philadelphia Phillies as far as who these teams are trying to bring in, who they're in the market for, who they're willing to pay for. And the Braves, a little bit of news as well, just became a publicly traded organization. So similar to that of the Green Bay Packers up in Wisconsin in the NFL, where you can own stock in a team. And they decided that they wanted to go ahead and post the team like that as a publicly owned, where you could buy stock in the team. So how does that affect their revenue spend and everything there? Something to keep an eye on. So an interesting offseason for our foes down in Atlanta coming up, and one that's similar to the plans of the Philadelphia Phillies. So there you go. That's our first check-in on the Atlanta Braves. Now, tomorrow, we're going to do a look-in on the Thanksgiving episode. Not only will we open with the biggest news from Bryce Harper's surgery and what we hear from there, but we will also do the New York Mets, go through their options, and a little fun side topic after. But coming up next on Locked On Phillies, we're continuing with our rotation uh, player reviews. And yesterday did Ranger Suarez. Today, we're going to look at who the number 4 starter was for the Philadelphia Phillies largely for this year. One, Kyle Gibson. And my review of Kyle Gibson, I'll just warn you, will not be as favorable as the B- grade that I gave Ranger Suarez yesterday. We'll discuss it next on Locked On Phillies. All right, let me tell you about my friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer. World Cup going on right now. The USA, a tough draw against Wales yesterday. But hey, a couple more games. They got England Friday. They got Iran next week. Keep an eye on that. BetOnline's got your lines for that. They got esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, I should be able to say the word podcast. I'm doing one right now. You can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, it's 2022 player review time for Kyle Gibson. And what a year it was not for Gibson, who is now a free agent, no longer with the Phillies. The 35-year-old just didn't have a great year. Or did he? Well, I don't know if I'd say great. But when you look at the win-loss record, he was 10-8. He had a 5.05 ERA, which is not good whatsoever. But he threw 167 and 2/3 innings and struck out 144. The whip at 1.336 is not good, but we talked about Ranger Suarez with a 1.333 whip yesterday, and I gave him a B-. Is it possible that the late starts from Kyle Gibson overshadowed what was actually not a terrible year from him? And my answer to that is possibly. It is certainly a chance that down the stretch, Kyle Gibson's implosions at his inability to be in the starting rotation were they mask how good he was at points this year. I'm just looking at a couple games. Now, he opened up in game 2 of the season with 10 strikeouts against the Oakland Athletics in a 4-2 win. That's pretty darn good. He had a start against the Cincinnati Reds in an 11-4 win where he struck out 11. That's also really good. I mean, he had a couple. When he's got his really good stuff going, he has a ceiling of strikeout potential that is relatively high compared to your average major league pitcher. The issue is his command wasn't great at points this year. His stuff fell off near the end. I think it's kind of an age thing too. I think it was a situation where he's a 35-year-old who's just doesn't have that much left in the tank anymore. I know he was 34 over the course of the season, just turned 35 on October 23rd, but I don't know. He fell off big time in the last couple starts of the year. He was unusable as a starter down the stretch and got moved to the bullpen. Didn't make any starts in the playoffs for the Philadelphia Phillies, thank goodness, because frankly, you couldn't trust Gibson to make a start. And I believe he only had one playoff appearance. Let me see. It might have been 2 playoff appearances for the Philadelphia Phillies. Actually, he had 2 this year. He had a relief appearance where he went 1 1/3 innings pitch against the San Diego Padres. 1 hit, no runs, no earned. And he had a relief appearance in Game 3 of the World Series, the opener in Philly against the Astros, with a 7-0 victory. 1 inning pitched, 1 hit given up, no runs, no earned. So he didn't give up a run in the postseason, so that's good. But he only pitched 2.1 innings in the postseason because he frankly wasn't all that reliable for what you brought him in here to do. So now we have an interesting little crossover of like how I grade Kyle Gibson out based on this season, because he fell apart as a starter and then he did all right as a reliever, and he had some really strong moments as a starter partway through the year. How does this grade out? Well, I'll tell you before we get into the seminal moment. I'm not going to give him the grade, but this will kind of lean towards how I will grade Kyle Gibson out in just a second. He was brought in here to be a third or a fourth starter. And this year, I don't feel like he accomplished that. I don't feel like he was good enough. I don't think he's got any shot to come back on this team. Free agent, just kind of say thank you for the 2 years or the year and a half because he came in at the trade deadline last year. It's still a beneficial trade because Spencer Howard is absolutely unplayable and unpitchable at the major league level for the Texas Rangers right now. So you still won that trade, but you expect more from Kyle Gibson in big spots this year that you just didn't quite get from him. And I'm perfectly fine with him not being a part of this team next year. Not that it's like, oh, we hate Kyle Gibson, get rid of Kyle. Like, I don't know. You're a better team than one that needs to employ Kyle Gibson in the starting rotation for where he is in his career. But he did have moments this year. And I guess I've got to say, because he didn't really have a big moment in the postseason. So this is probably going to be our first guy that we do a big moment for, his biggest moment of 2022, where the moment did not come in the postseason. For me, I'm going to go ahead and say his biggest moment was the game on August 23rd in Cincinnati against the Cincinnati Reds. You're starting to get into that whole playoff push territory. Zach Wheeler's hurt. Aaron Nola, in September has all these questions. So you're like, okay, let's try and make up ground in the NL East at this point of the season while still trying to hold down a wild card spot. And Kyle Gibson comes out and he helps you get the win by going 6 innings pitched with 11 strikeouts. Now he gave up 6 hits, 3 runs, 3 earned, but they were on 2 home runs and they were kind of fluky and everything. And the Phillies won that game 11-4. I just think his best stuff of the year was in that start against Cincinnati. I do believe the 11 strikeouts is a career high or tied for a career high for him as well in a single game in his career. So that's where I'm going with for his biggest performance of the year. And I know he made some big relief appearances, one in the World Series and one in the NLDS against the Braves. But now I'm leaning that start because he was brought in here to be a starting pitcher. Now, how I grade him, I can't give him any. I think it was a below average year. Well, it's so tough. Yeah, I'm going to have to give him a C minus. I feel like I can't call this year average. When you get pulled out of the rotation ahead of some of the biggest games of your team's year, that's not good. It's part of the reason why you had to go get Noah Syndergaard at the trade deadline. So yeah, I'm giving Kyle Gibson a C minus for his 2022 season, probably his final season as a Philadelphia Philly, but still part of a team that made a magical run. And we'll forever thank him for that. And you still won the trade with Spencer Howard going to the Rangers and doing nothing. So Kyle Gibson, largely this time here in Philadelphia, you got what you wanted from him, or I guess you got more than what you gave up. Just this year, slightly below average year for Kyle Gibson, even though he was only expected to be a 4th or a 5th starter. So that's what you have there as far as the reviews. Now, coming up next, it's Wednesday, so it's time for Stepping Off. Now, Stepping Off is a segment where we step outside the lines of baseball and we do a little bit of a discussion about some things that don't affect the Phillies on the field, and a fun little side topic. And I know I know Thanksgiving tomorrow, but actually, you know what? We're going to bump up that segment that I was talking about. We're going to give a little bit of thanks and stepping off for some Philadelphia Phillies that we should be especially thankful for. We wrap up today with Stepping Off. Coming up next on today's Locked On Phillies. Yes, it's time for Stepping Off. Now, let me explain to you exactly what this segment is. What it is basically you take a step back off the rubber, like you're a pitcher. When you're on the mound and it seems like a lot of stuff's going on, sometimes you just need to collect yourself, take a deep breath, step off the mound, go back to work. And we do that with this segment every Wednesday, middle of the week. I was going to move it because the holiday's Thursday, but it's Thanksgiving Eve. Let's go ahead and get going. Biggest bar night of the year, so maybe you're pre-gaming while you're watching this, getting ready to go out with some hometown buddies. Maybe you're back home staying in your childhood bedroom, like I'm going to be a little bit later today. But yeah, so for Stepping Off, we're going to talk about just some Phillies things that we should be exceptionally thankful for. The first thing I'm going to start with is John Middleton. It all starts at the top. Having an owner that's willing to spend money to make your team a championship caliber team, that's something to absolutely be thankful for. Dave Dombrowski, just told you about it in yesterday's episode a 3-year extension as president of baseball operations. Extremely thankful for his ability to put together a championship caliber team. Bryce Harper, thankfully he chose Philly. He had other options on the table, but he felt this fan base and this place was a good place for him to win and a place for him to raise his family. Thankful that Bryce Harper is here and he's embraced the city the way that he has. Thankful that Zach Wheeler isn't a New York Met. Crazy that he's not, but thankful that he ended up in Philadelphia Phillies pinstripes, an outstanding arm. Thankful that Aaron Nola has weathered the storm of negativity here in Philadelphia surrounding him. Not saying it's undeserved, but he's a guy that's going to be important to this team while he's still here. And thankful that he continues to pitch big seasons worth of games. Even if in the biggest moments he's not your best pitcher, and he fell apart at points where he needed him most this last year, he still had some really, really big starts and overall and really good season for the Philadelphia Phillies. Thankful for that. I mean, let's look at some other positional players. Thankful for Kyle Schwarber coming here, being a vocal leader of this team, mashing home runs. Thankful for JT Realmuto being the best catcher in baseball and being here in Philadelphia and wanting to sign an extension to stay with this city. Love that. Thankful that the 2022 season is over for Nick Castellanos and hopefully he'll bounce back in 2023. Thankful that Bryson Stott is now finally a young, well, let's just say we're thankful for the Phillies daycare in general. Brandon Marsh, Alec Bohm, Matt Vierling, Nick Maton, Bryson Stott, these guys that are going to be the next generation of great Phillies players that need to be big in this championship window. Thankful that the farm system has created these guys, or the trades have brought these guys in. It's awesome. And the last one that I want to say, and if I miss, if there's players I didn't mention, it's not because I'm not thankful for them. Just ones that come to mind here. But this guy, thankful for Rob Thompson. There was a great article in The Athletic by Matt Kell, who covers the team. It came out yesterday, 2 days ago. Go ahead and check it out if you get the chance, about Rob Thompson, who was ready to retire after the season if he was going to still be the bench coach. It was going to be his last season. He was going to hang it up. And he got an opportunity when Joe Girardi was let go. And now 2-year contracts, great manager, absolutely snubbed for manager of the year. But to have a leader like him, man, this is such a special opportunity for the Philadelphia Phillies to have this core, this owner, this president of baseball operations in the front office, and the manager in Rob Thompson. Philly Rob, regardless of the Wheeler decision in the World Series and some questionable stuff that people may not always agree with, largely great decisions as a manager, and a guy that this team clearly wants to, pardon the pun, go to bat for. So thankful that Rob Thompson is here to lead all of them. And thankful for you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Thank you so much for a year of blessings and listening and following along. And everybody, we're up to nearly 500 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much for all of that. You have no idea how much I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to what I have to say about the Philadelphia Phillies. So thank you for that. And thanks for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available on Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Now make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. Breaking news from all around sports, the biggest news from everything, baseball, basketball, football, hockey. You got soccer going on with the World Cup. Check out Locked On Sports Today, and they'll have all the biggest news on the latest breaking news. So go ahead and check them out. They're available on YouTube, Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for today's Locked On Phillies. Happy Thanksgiving Eve, and I will talk to you tomorrow on Thanksgiving on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.